Applaud, but don't throw broccoli either, okay? So, I gotta tell you, you ladies make me nervous. I don't usually get to talk to a group of women, but I'm very honored, and I thank you for the opportunity. I really, really do. So, and Libby is the lady that handed out the sheets to you a moment ago, so she's the best part of the deal. Let me introduce you to Addie, little Adeline Joy. Adeline Joy was 2 years old on November 12 of 2016, the day that she was officially diagnosed with a cancerous tumor on her brain. It is a highly aggressive, non-operable form that carries with it an average 9-month life expectancy. So think about that. November 12, 2016, Addie is, as far as we can tell, doing pretty good today. She immediately underwent all the standard treatments for this cancer, which included 33 radiation sessions. The tumor shrunk down and was stable for about 6 months, and then middle part of 2017, last year, the doctors said to her folks, hey, it's growing again, and it's growing this time at a truly alarming rate. So what like all parents would do, I think, they pushed for anything that would help their little child. And they learned of a treatment that is offered only in Mexico, south of San Diego, that costs a minimum $250,000, none of which would be covered by insurance. It's still considered an experimental treatment, but it's showing some pretty good long-term results. And to date, Addie's little body is responding well. The tumor has shrunk. An ancillary tumor that came up is now considered gone. Is that right, Libby? This past Tuesday, Addie had another treatment. As far as we know, she did really well with that. The picture we saw was of her after the treatment with a big plate of food in front of her, so she was feeling good enough to eat. But as you can imagine, the faith of Addie's family has just been rocked to the core. And they've prayed and they've pleaded for Addie's healing. They've prayed for wisdom. They've prayed for strength. They've prayed to be graceful during this time. They're praying that their experience might pave the way for people to have a different experience when the same diagnosis is given. Little Addie happens to be one of Libby's many, many cousins. So this is, it's our family's current story. It's kind of neat. It's a story of love and faithfulness and acts of charity and philanthropy and ingenuity to get what this little girl needs at this time that she needs them anyway. Addie's mom has been great and full of grace. Addie's Grammy has been a lady that exhibits amazing amounts of poise. Her great-grandmother has truly been adorned in dignity, I think is a good way to say it. They're not alone. I would imagine that in your family or in your friendship circle, somebody's experiencing something probably just as rough. And yet they're doing it dressed in faithfulness and grace. As a guy, I can say you ladies do that better than we typically do. You're just more naturally, easily exemplifying to our world grace. You wear it well. You're more agile and nimble than we are usually. We're more rigid and hard and suck it up kind of thing, and you experience courtesy and decency, and you share those things. You're respectful. You have certain decorum about you. There's just a really politeness in your lives that we admire, even if we don't say it enough. We do admire it. As Christian ladies and even as Christian men, we're always just trying to figure out how do I get through this life with some measure of grace coming from me, because God gives it to me every day. I can just say this about ladies and your theme. Ladies who are dressed in grace shine more today than perhaps ever, certainly ever in our history, right? Certainly ever in our lifetimes. So I am really excited that you came here today to be encouraged to be dressed in grace. And so I just wanted to talk to you about being dressed in grace, motivated by faith, synergized in your families, expressed through philanthropy or generosity. I was introduced, again, my name is David Duncan. I am the Executive Director of Commission Foundation. Commission Foundation is a community foundation. We serve independent Christian churches and independent churches around the country to help people to whom God has entrusted resources manage those in such a way that they bring glory and honor to God and accomplish kingdom work here and around the world. I love what I get to do. In fact, I didn't bring my cartoon, but my favorite cartoon about what I get to do is from a real deep religious theologian. You've got some of those around this college, you know, Dr. Pelfrey and those kind of guys. This guy's name was Charles Schultz. I don't know if you ever read the Peanuts strip, okay? He was also a great theologian. So in one little strip that I just love, here's Linus coming to Charlie Brown, and Linus says, when I get big, I want to be a great philanthropist. And you probably know Charlie Brown was always a wet blanket, right? So he said to Linus, well, you have to have a lot of money to be a great philanthropist. And in the cartoon, there were 4 boxes. And in the 3rd box, you just see Linus kind of pondering. But in the 4th box, he comes back and he says, well, I want to be a great philanthropist with other people's money. And I'm like, that's what I get to do. That's why I like what I get to do so much at Commission Foundation. So thank you for coming dressed in grace, hoping to be even more dressed in grace, and letting me talk for a few minutes here about faith, family, and philanthropy. We'll get you out in plenty of time before 6, so you can get your good seats in there at the banquet, and I'm sure you're going to have a really good evening. By the way, if you want to learn more about Addie, I put that up there. If you're on Facebook, that's the Facebook search, Hope for Addie Joy. It's an encouraging story right now as you see how that family's dealing with it. So there you are. By the way, I also want to say thanks for sticking around, because, I mean, you couldn't get another lady in here for Cindy, and I'm just glad some of you stuck around. Okay, we're going to talk about women and family first. I got to do something different because I'm not good with microphones. Here we go. We've already had Kevin mention a recipe. So what women are superb at, to me, is passing down family heirlooms, or maybe it is grandma's recipe. Faith or women in family, those values are transferred in such a wonderful way. You probably can't really see this. But what this is, it's a photograph of a little recipe book that Libby has in a drawer in our kitchen. And it was given to her by her mother when we got married almost 38 years ago. And it's all boogered up now. I mean, the spine's broken, the pages are falling out, there's stuff stuck in there. Every kind of ingredient is spilled all over this thing. Is that typical? Okay, I just want to be sure. But I don't think you've got enough money between you to get that away from Libby, because that is passed down from her mama and the grandmas and the aunts and the cousins, and it just means so much. So women and faith, Cindy's going to knock out of the park tonight at your banquet. Women and family, I want to encourage you. Oh, yeah, this lady was really into it as well. Have you seen that? I don't know where that is, but I'm like, wow, that woman was proud of those cookies. And if you want that recipe, come up afterwards, we'll give you a slide, okay? Probably some really good Christmas cookies. Women and family, in my world, you need to do some planning, because it's coming your way. There are 3 scenarios I want to run through real quickly. Who here, by a show of hands, if you will, still have minor children in your home? Okay, children under the age of 18, right? Okay, Libby and I no longer have children in our home under the age of 18. I kind of miss it this time of year because they were a nice tax write-off while it lasted. Okay, they're not anymore. I want to suggest that if you have minor children, you need a good, solid plan in place for these 3 reasons. Let me explore each one of them with you. First, you need a plan that will help nominate guardians. Nobody wants to think that the 2 of them will be gone and their kids will be truly orphaned. But it has happened, and it probably will continue to happen. And if you want to have a say in who the legal guardians will become, you probably want to have a plan in place. You're going to want to have a trust fund to take care of your children while they continue to be minors, and you're going to want to make sure there's money to put in that trust. Let me expand a little bit on that. So, selection of who would be guardians of our children was one of the most difficult things that we had to do when we had our children at home. Can I get an amen from those of you who, it's very hard, isn't it? Like, it's who do I pick? It's not easy. I have a friend and a mentor in this business, and he said, David, let me tell you a story, and I think it'll give you some insight into it. So I'm going to share that story with you. He said, when I was younger in the business and had kids at home, I used to travel to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and every Tuesday I would meet with an attorney there, and we would go see people throughout the day, and we would do plans for them, and then we would have dinner together, and the attorney's name was Frank. And I would buy Frank's dinner for the privilege of asking him any question I could about legal things, and he would answer. And so he said, I learned so much over those dinners. And he said, one night on a Tuesday, I bought Frank dinner, and while he was eating, I said, hey, Frank, I know how my wife and I are going to select the guardian of our minor children. And particularly, they had a son at that time who was 4 years old, I think. He said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to look around in our church for a couple who wish they had children but don't have children, and we're going to say, would you be the guardians of our children if something happens to us? And he said, Frank put down his fork, leaned back, pulled a pipe out of his pocket. This was back when restaurants still allowed this type of thing. Loaded his pipe up, lit it, blew a big puff of smoke in my friend Ray's face, and he said, Ray, I guess you just don't understand how God works at all, do you? And he said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, how does a woman become the experienced mother of a 4-year-old son like you have? By rearing a 4-minute-old son, and a 4-day-old son, and a 4-month-old son, and a 1 and a 2 and a 3. It's on-the-job experience, right, ladies? And so he said, you know, I don't know who you're thinking about, but it could be that people who've never reared children aren't the best choice of a guardian to rear your children because they may lack the practical on-the-job experience. And then he said, and Frank just kept going after that. He said, let me tell you another thing, Ray. People with 2 children don't want to be guardians of your kids because people with 2 children have 2 children because they want 2 children. Guess how many children Libby and I have? 2 children. Yeah. We had Emily, our daughter, and then 4 years later, just pretty much exactly, we had our son Isaac because we wanted Emily to be old enough to help mom with the dishes and things, and we wouldn't have double college tuition. And if you believe that, no, we had 2 children because that's the way it worked out. And we're so thankful to God that we had the 2 we had. We did end up with Emily first, and then 4 years later, we did have her brother Isaac, and that's been nice in the way it was. But you know, there is something to it. There are families where 5, 6, 7, 8, Libby's from a family of 5. So how many of you are from a family of 5 or more? Yeah, so, I mean, there are families where that's a wonderful, beautiful thing, isn't it? And so we're real happy about that. But there's something to what Frank told Ray, too. And then he went on to say, hey, and let me tell you something else. Families with kids that are older than your children probably don't want your children either, because when their children grow up and they experience the empty nest, you think they want chicklings back in there? I'm like, that's me, right? I mean, we told each of our kids, when you leave, you are invited back no longer than 3 weeks at any given period in a 12-month section, you know. So we're obviously joking, but we like living in an empty nest, and others have, so see, I got people nodding their heads here. He went on to say, and let me tell you one more thing. If it's at all possible, don't name the grandparents to be guardians of your kids, your minor children. Because God gave children grandparents for a very special reason. Raise your hand if you're a grandma in the room. Okay, what is the very special reason that God gave children grandparents? To spoil them and send them home, right? Yeah. So our little boy turned 6 or 7, I don't remember, and Libby's mom, being the wonderful grandma that she is over in Kansas, bought him a snare drum for his birthday and sent it home. My dad in Indiana figured he could top that, so he bought him a .22 rifle. I'm like, what's going on? But that's the role, isn't it? And we've watched families in our own church down there in Joplin that have had to become the legal guardians, in essence, the parents of little children, and it's tough. We're 59. Okay, well, actually, Libby's 59. I'm not yet 59. But it's close, okay? It's close. We don't necessarily think we have the juice anymore to raise little children, right? So what do you do? You know, I was working with a couple at College Heights Christian Church just this last Tuesday night, and they came into the room, and we were talking about the selection of guardians. And I said, this is the toughest decision that you'll probably ever make, is who would rear your children if you couldn't do it? And they said, oh, no, we got this figured out. I said, really? Tell me about that. And they said, well, we've asked, and they named the couple, and they're in our home group, and they've got kids about our age, and they love the Lord just like we love the Lord, and we're not family, but we just think alike, and we think they would, and they said they would, and we're going to offer to do it for them. And I'm like, you know, that's a pretty good idea. And that's actually kind of where my friend Ray settled, is it may be more important or less important that you have a guardian who is a blood relative than you have a guardian who is a blood of Jesus relative. Because lifestyle is the ultimate thing, right? I mean, by all means, I wanted our children to grow up to vote a specific way, to drive a certain kind of automobile or a certain make of automobile, and to be St. Louis Cardinals fans. I mean, you know, come on, right? It's important, this lifestyle thing. We determined we really wanted our children to grow up to be nurtured in the admonition of the Lord, if at all possible. At one point in time, we had named Libby's brother, who lives out in Libby, Montana, of all places. And if something happened to us, our children would have moved out to northwest Montana. And then one day we got to go out to Libby, Montana on vacation. And we went, oh my, they're still wearing bell-bottom blue jeans out here. And it wasn't when they came back in style, you know, they'd never gone out. Those are wonderful people out there, but it actually occurred to us, southwest Missouri to northwest Montana is a long way. It's actually 2,200 and some miles. Not the same friends, not the same church, not the same schools. And we changed our plan. And we ended up selecting Libby's sister, who has never married, has no children of her own, violating Rule 1, but who said to us, I would pack up and move into your home so your kids could stay in their home and go to their church in order to rear them until they were ready to move out. And we thought, we can't get a deal better than that. Now, thankfully, they're in their 30s and, you know, we're past it. So we're very grateful that we didn't ever have to experience it. But I'm telling you, for those of you who said you have minor children, you want to have a plan and you want to think it through and you want to have nominated a guardian or guardians that you think would do the job. Now, if you have minor children and God does, for some reason, choose to call you home, you need to have what I refer to as a trust for minor children, or in essence, a bucket of money to make sure those children are taken care of. That bucket of money is going to do some really good things for you, like postponed distribution. Do you ever think about what the legal age of an inheritance is in the state of Missouri or every other state of the Union? It's age 18. Okay, raise your hand if during your 18th year of life you purchased anything of value that you still have today. Same response as in a group full of men. That's interesting. I actually thought you ladies might have had some stuff. But normally there'll be some smart aleck guy say, yeah, I bought a Ford Mustang, and I still have, you know, I'm like, okay, that's good for you. We don't normally want kids to inherit at age 18. So if you have the money that you leave for them in a special trust, it won't. It will distribute to them when you think it's appropriate, maybe a third of it at age 25. And then the second third at age 28. Why? So they can see how they blew the first third before they get the second third, right? And then maybe the rest of it at 30 or 32. The point is, there are lots of reasons why you want to have it where your children don't inherit the money right at the legal age, but rather they have someone who is more mature, more experienced, guiding them through the process. And it is possible that as your children get into their adult years, there could be some needs for incompetency provisions, meaning they're either unable or should not be given large sums or sums of money at any one given time. And so the money could actually stay in trust and help supply a better lifestyle for them rather than fund something that you wouldn't want to have happen. Now, a lot of times people say to me, well, golly, we're just talking about minor children, which means we haven't had a chance to build up much of an estate. How am I going to have anything to put in that trust or that bucket? How do I fund that? And I am not an insurance salesman, and I couldn't sell you a policy if you wanted me to, but I'm telling you, unless you have been diagnosed with some kind of an incurable illness or had some serious malady in your recent past, you could go out and buy term life insurance for very little monthly money that would provide the resources to fill that bucket if in fact your death occurs. Any Dave Ramsey aficionados here? Okay, so Dave Ramsey talks about this all the time. He recommends Zander Company. I've been buying term life from Select Quote for 25 years, I suppose, 20 years at least. There are other companies that do it, but the idea is they're going to look around and find a company that gets you a really good deal. I was with another couple Tuesday night. They were in their 40s. They had just bought $250,000 policies on each of them. His was costing him about $20 a month. Okay. So it's very important that if you have not had time to accumulate enough assets to leave money to care for your children, that you consider the value of a term life insurance policy. Now, to go back over that real quickly here, let me just back up. If you have minor children or you know someone who does and you love them, this is sort of very baseline planning that I encourage you. If you want to be a woman of family, consider having these kinds of documents in place. The sheet that you were given earlier is our way of knowing who was in the room, but it's also your way of saying, hey, I would like some more information or maybe even a chance to sit down and talk some of this stuff through with someone. So when you fill that sheet out, when you leave this evening, Libby's going to give you a little booklet, but in addition to that, we'll know if we need to contact you to talk about some of these things, because we don't want to just suggest you need to do this and you have questions and you don't have an opportunity to get those questions answered. So be sure to leave that sheet for us tonight. Second thing, if you want to be a woman of family, I want you to know you need to have a plan for your personal estate. You need to take care of your own business as well. Have a valid will or a revocable living trust that says, if I'm not here to deal with this stuff, all the stuff that is mine, here's what I want to have happen to it. Coordinate property titles with your documents and include powers of attorney. A little more detail on each one of those. What does a will do? It basically distributes items that are not titled in any way, but are yours. Those are often referred to as household goods and personal effects. There's a more technical term that I often use, stuff. You have any stuff? Okay, a will can distribute that. A will distributes property that is titled in your name only. So you have an automobile that you bought and it's titled in your name only, you could distribute it through your will. You have real estate that you own that's titled in your name only, you can distribute it through your will. Any of those types of things, anything that you have with a title on it, a will can distribute. Or it can distribute all those personal items in mass or as a bulk group. It does not distribute items that pass otherwise by beneficiary or titling. So, if you're married and you have a home that is titled in both your name and your husband's name, If one of you passes away, the property automatically becomes the property of whom? The survivor of the two, right? In Missouri, that's a pretty common way for husbands and wives to title real estate. It's called tenants by the entirety. Excuse me. And it simply means that if I pass away, Libby gets it. If Libby passes away, I get it. And that's common titling. But you can do that with anybody you want to. You can have other people on the title of your property so that it will pass to them by titling, and you don't have to have a will to accomplish that. But I want to encourage you to think strongly about having a will, because it is a very important fundamental document. This titling concept, however, has become more and more positive for us in Missouri. Did you know that you can put on your automobile transfer on death? It's called TOD on the back. Some of you said, yeah, I do. So if you want to give your car to a certain one of the children or a certain somebody, you want to give it to college and let them use it or sell it, just put on the back, transfer on death, and list who it is you want to have it. And when those people present at the Automobile Licensing Bureau, the titling thing, a death certificate that proves you in fact did go to be with Jesus, that will pass outside probate and it'll go there. You can do that on real estate in Missouri. You can do it on a house, on a farm, on a business property. You just call it a beneficiary deed. You just say, when I don't need this property anymore because I'm gone, I want this person or these people to receive it. It avoids probate, which is a pretty good thing generally, and it will be a very quick transfer once death is proven to the deed recording office. However, improperly titled assets can blow up an otherwise really good estate plan. Quick story, we're talking about minor parents, parents of minor children that actually pass away. This one happened over on the East Coast. A friend of mine told me about it. They had a good will. The will said, take care of our kids with the money we leave behind. The will said, we want to give them a third of the distribution after they're out of college. And so they not arbitrarily, but kind of figured by 25 they'd be out of college. So the will said give them the third at age 25, give them another third at 30, and then the final third at 35. And unfortunately, this couple was killed in an accident. The will took effect, and the assets were placed into a trust for minor children, and the trustee was allowed to take care of the kids with one major exception. The primary funding thing for their trust was a life insurance policy. But on the life insurance policy, instead of naming the trust for their minor children as the beneficiary, they named their children. When did the children get their money? At age 18. Because the life insurance company had to follow the contract. The contract said these are the beneficiaries. As soon as they're legal, they got the money. So be careful on this area of titling. I want you to have a will, I want you to have a trust, but I want you to also make sure that you've thought through, is my property properly titled to make my will and trust valid? And then powers of attorney. Powers of attorney simply say, okay, my will won't take effect until I am dead. I mean, even the Bible says that, right? In Hebrews, that the will is not effective until the death of the testator. We call a will a last will and testament. Okay? But many of us will experience a time or an end of our life period for a long time where we're unable to manage our own affairs via disability or inability. What are we going to do to make sure we're cared for and that our business is cared for during that time? What you do is use what's called a power of attorney. You find someone that you totally trust while you're capable of making this decision, and you say, if I can't manage my own financial affairs, I want you to do it. And then you give the same kind of power to someone for your medical care. If I can't manage my own affairs, I want you to do it. And then you use a healthcare directive and you specifically say, if I am in this kind of a condition, don't hook me up. Have anybody done those? Okay, good. That's good. Living wills, healthcare directives, directives to physicians. We live 12 miles from Carthage, Missouri. Carthage, Missouri is famous for a number of things, but one of them is the Nancy Cruzan case back in the 1990s. Remember that? Nancy was in an accident. She was for many, many years in what was termed a persistent vegetative state, meaning nobody thought she would wake up. Her father sued to have her disconnected from life support. The state of Missouri stepped in and said, we don't have proof that this was Nancy's desire, even though some friends had said we think that was her desire. The family said we think it was her desire. The state said that's not good enough. We need proof. So the state said, no, we're not going to let you disconnect her. We have to have an interest in her life. The Cruzan family took it all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, and they won. And they disconnected Nancy. And within a very short number of hours, she died. The sad part of the story to me is that her father, Joe, within 8 years, was also dead by suicide. Because he won the court battle, but that was not his heart. There were right-to-life protesters outside of their home. Joe made a pot of coffee and took it out to them on a cold morning. But he just couldn't get his mind around what had to happen there. We wish Nancy would have had a health care directive. Actually, her case began a wave and a tsunami, if you will, across the country of new legislation to allow us to make our wishes known in writing so that that kind of thing doesn't have to happen routinely. I'm wondering if you've done that yet. If not, I sure encourage you. It helps make things easier and better for your family and keeps everybody on the same page. So if you want to be a woman of family, I want you to consider the minor children situation, your own personal planning, and then thirdly, a plan for others who are in your care. Is there anybody here caring for an aged parent? Yeah. And many of us anticipate some period of time where that's going to be necessary, right? Because why? Because it's what we do. It's what women of grace do, right? When you're dressed in grace, you take care of those of your own. It's 1 Timothy chapter 5. There was an argument about supporting widows in the church. Have you read that? And Paul said, hey, look, I'm all for supporting widows, Timothy. And if they're widows indeed, meaning widows in need, support them. But if they have children and or grandchildren, let them take care of them first and learn to be righteous people. It's what we should do as believers. But I want you to know there are some things that if you have this coming or is already in your life, I want you to consider. The very same thing we just ended on. You need to make sure that that person has powers of attorney, giving you or someone else they trust the ability to manage their business before they lose that ability. Make sure that somebody has that ability. It'll make your decisions easier, their medical decisions easier. It'll keep the family on the same page. What do people argue over when estates settle out? Is it money or is it heirloom stuff more often? Have you ever thought about that? You know, if you give me $100,000 and there are 4 children, the math's not difficult, is it? $25,000 per child. But if you give me great-grandma's china set and there are 4 children, nobody wants 2 table settings. Somebody wants all 8, right? It can be very difficult. So while people have got their faculties, help them think through things like this. Who do you want to manage your affairs? Have you thought about who gets what, Mom? Dad, can I help you with that? Because, you know, there's a day coming when you might not be able to make your own medic. Can we help? So if you're caring for others, I want you to think about powers of attorney. Certainly estate plans. It gets terribly uncomfortable. My folks are in their 80s. I do this for a living. It's terribly uncomfortable for my father to talk to me about it. But once in a while, I make him talk to me about it. I try to make him talk to me about it. I say to him, Dad, will you please tell me where things are these days? You know, I really ask him, how are you doing on it? Trying to be a very concerned and helpful son. And it will be uncomfortable most likely, but I encourage you, if you're caring for people, ask them to help you do that in the best way possible. So, ladies, if you want to be a woman of family, think about what's the minor children situation. Have we got a plan in place? Think about your own. Do you have your own will in place? Do you have your own powers of attorney? Have you done what you need to do to be a good steward of your own life? And then if you're caring for others, how can you help them now? Now, on that sheet that we gave you to leave with us, it says, please contact me regarding reviewing. It's either a review or reviewing. Sorry, you can take the A out of there. Reviewing or creating my estate plan. And this includes information about guardianship, wills, trust, power, all these things we've just been talking about. If you want information about that, if you want help about that, check that box, would you? And give us the contact information we need to get with you. And somebody will get with you about that. Maybe Philip Marley, maybe myself, but we'll touch base with you. And we'll be glad to help you think that through. Let me move to the last thing here, and we'll spend just a few moments on women and philanthropy. I am surrounded by generous women in my family. I'm very blessed that way. I have the most kind, loving, caring, giving women in my family. This means a lot to me. I love the fact that Libby models generosity. What does philanthropy mean? Literally means philos. Remember the types of love? Okay, the philos type of love is love for mankind. And that's literally what philanthropy means. Anthropy meaning mankind, philos meaning love. The love of mankind is philanthropy. As a group of people, should women dressed in grace not lead the pack of loving mankind? And I'm so grateful that you do, and that I'm surrounded by women like you. You'll likely be making the final distributions. Did you ever think about that? In my world, all the money ends up in the hands of women. It's just true, isn't it? You have the ability to impact what goes to kingdom work. And if you have a plan in place, it'll make things a lot easier. Can you see that cartoon? I don't know if you can or not. Little Dot says, Grandma told me she used to have to lick stamps. Was she kidding? If, of all the people in the United States age 65 or older, 57% of them are women. 85 and older, 67% of women. You live an average of 5 years longer than men. I think those are the cutest little old ladies. I actually think the one on the left might be a little boy. I don't know, I can't tell. How does philanthropy start? Where does it start? It starts by knowing what you have and what you might be able to give. We're going to offer you, if you check that first box as you're leaving today, we're going to offer you a little booklet called A Confidential Estate Inventory. It's designed for you to take home, and it's broken down into 4 sections. They all start with the letter P: people, property, plans, and planners. The idea is if you sit down and you say, hey, who should I put on my list to be generous to? And then it gives you some scripture ideas, some principles from the Word of God, and it helps you put down in different categories who those people ought to be. Property, it helps you collect, what do I have, where did I get it, when did I get it, what did it cost when I got it, what's it worth today, and how's it titled? And then plans, how do I want the property to pass to the people? And then planners, if you have some professionals who help you. It's a very helpful little booklet. I hope you'll ask for one or take one home here tonight, because it will help you know what you have, and it will help guide you through what you might want to do with it. You can give so many different things, ladies. The first one, giving money, is the one we're all most familiar with, right? I mean, that's the easiest one. Everybody pretty much knows how to give away a Benjamin here and there if they want to. But other assets can make a huge impact in the kingdom of God. Libby and I were so fortunate. In the last part of last year, we got to work with a couple in Kansas, and they wanted to give a piece of real estate to a couple of organizations they love. They're an older couple. They've been married how long, Libby? 70-some years. Yeah, 70. I mean, they're an older couple. We were at their home, just as sharp and bright as you can imagine. He started telling me, he said, David, I want to give away that warehouse. I said, okay, well, let's talk about what all you have. And we did a little quick inventory thing, came out, yeah, he's got plenty. He can afford to give away the warehouse. I said, so tell me, Harold, when do you want to do that? He looked at me and he said, David, I'm 96 years old. And I took that to mean, where were you yesterday? Why weren't we doing this yesterday? You know. And we got that done. And literally, he jumped up and clicked his heels to show us he could at 96. But he was so excited to be generous. And his wife was so over the top excited in a quiet sort of fashion, because God had let them have some non-cash assets that they didn't need anymore. And they now know their ministry is using those all over the world. So there are Wonderful non-cash ways to give. Real estate, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, tangible personal property, all kinds of things. If you think of it, it could probably become a charitable gift to be of value to somebody you care about. There are a few ways that you can give a gift today, and the value of the gift will be used to calculate an income for you for the rest of your life. And then when you don't need it anymore, when you go be with the Lord, the leftovers go to the charity. There are a couple of really great tools. Now I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking maybe nobody applies, because generally these work best for adults who are over 70, and I don't think I see anybody in here who would. Well, no, you're not supposed to raise your hand. Called Charitable Gift Annuity and Charitable Remainder Trust, and we have a second box on that sheet. If you say, oh, I didn't know, you mean I can combine my charitable giving and income to help my lifestyle while I'm still here on earth, check that box and we can talk to you about that. The third box on there is simply if you're interested in giving non-cash assets. If you're thinking, hey, I've got something that I might be able or willing to contribute for a charitable gift. I'm not talking about just to Central, though Central would appreciate it and be worthy of it. I'm talking about to any ministry that you love and care about. So you women in philanthropy, I get so excited because no kidding, the money will end up most likely with you. And no kidding, dressed in grace, faithful in your families, faithful in your philanthropy, it's going to be an amazing thing, and I look forward to it. I hope Libby gets to make the final distributions of whatever estate we have, because I totally trust her heart to do wonderful things with it. Ladies, thanks for coming.